Hello and welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with Jon Uhler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today on the show, Ute Heggen is back. Ute is such a valued guest here on the program. Jon, great to have you back as well. Let's bring Jon and Ute right in and let them pick up from where they left off.
Brad, thank you for that impassioned introduction. I recommend people go back and watch the first part of this compelling story. It is a true life story, and we are here to shift the narrative that has been the carefully spun narrative that's out in the media, that it is these poor, sensitive men that are trying to find themselves, and they're just trying to be true to themselves and find the true identity, blah, blah, blah. No, that end up cross-dressing and dressing in women's underwear, and now they have a trans identity. No, these are men who have abandoned their families, walked out on their responsibility, and were unfaithful to their promises. These are moral cowards and moral degenerates because they're steeped in pornography. They do not deserve our sympathies. It is these, the trans widows, the wives of those deviant men who decided to feed their own deviant interests and then forsake their promises.
Jon, while these men have gotten caught up in that, I need to know something. Do we see the individuals who have created this porn industry as the real issue? We keep coming back to the man, the husband, the father, but I need to know that this isn't just about that individual making some poor decisions or some narcissistic decisions along the way, but would they really be in this position without the porn? They wouldn't, would they?
Right. The issue is deviance, and we'll have Ute speak to that. But Brad, you have opened up really the larger perspective of what unmasking the trans movement is all about, helping people connect the dots, because behind this is the porn industry. You notice that lawmakers are not getting serious about the likes of Pornhub, right? It is dumping. It's like a sewage line that's just spilling into the streets. The issue is deviance. That is what propels these men. Deviance has a progression downward in terms of moral depravity and what is predictable, and also in terms of selfishness. And then eventually it turns a man deviant, which means they're interested and they get off on having a significant negative impact on someone. Porn supercharges that process in the internet, and that's what we're seeing. And so Ute is a wife of a man who had a secret life, meaning he was deceptive. She didn't know it. He was so good at being deceptive that she didn't know it until she found these diaries. He comes back from a trip from San Francisco. She's in Chicago. We're having a family trip, meaning Ute is, and she finds these diaries. Go back and listen to part one, because the pathos, the pain is still there. Ute, the wives of these men that were unfaithful in the most deviant of ways, leave their families, leave their wives with trauma. And we could feel that. So pick up where we left off. We left off at a cliffhanger.
Yes. Thank you, Jon, and thank you, Brad. Yes, so I had just discovered the diaries, and we were then in Madison, Wisconsin, my hometown, for a family wedding. And then I'm trying to get him to tell me, well, what is your plan? And I found, for example, a moment to tell my parents that I think my marriage is changing. I found these diaries. He's doing things that were completely unexpected to me. And I remember when I told my father, he cried. And because he loved all his sons-in-laws as if they were sons. And he cried for me and our children and so on. And I, on some level, I think I wanted my dear father to just take me in and to say to my husband, to say to Nettie, you have to go, and Ute and the children are going to stay here with us. There was a wish, for my father to step in and take over. But of course, I was already in my 30s, and my parents were completely floored. They had never really heard of this. And so I told them I might have to leave, but I guess I'll go back with him, in end of August in
Ute,
1990.
if
Yeah.
I might, what you just said was so important for family members to know, for those of us that have not walked in your shoes. So if I'm a parent, I happen to be a parent of an adult daughter. So what you've just conveyed with us is very important, since this thing is unfortunately growing, that if your daughter, if your sister discloses what you just disclosed, then what would be helpful is to give them the option to stay with you. Is that what would be helpful?
Well, yes, I really wanted, actually, I had a fantasy even that my brothers-in-law who lived in town and my father, I wished that they could just kind of come and present a unified front as the men in the family who would protect me, the new mother, and say to Nettie, listen, we're not going to beat you up or anything. We're not going to do anything illegal, but you need to go. And we need to keep Ute and the children here because, you're having a family and these other things that you're doing don't belong together. But of course, that's very old fashioned. And I put on a strong face. I mean, that's something, I guess, with my Scandinavian background on my mother's side, that we learn to contain ourselves, right? We learn that you don't show it in your face. You don't reveal all this stress and emotion that you're having in the moment. And it's important to be strong for the children. And I'm proud of myself that I did that. But of course, I'm sort of not allowing myself to fully experience my own feelings. Which is probably why I ended up with PTSD, diagnosed much later. So I went back to our place in Brooklyn with him and sat down with him sort of evening after evening when he came home from work and said, so what's your plan? I think that we're going to have to separate. I don't understand what your plan is. And how did you find this Ruth? How did you find her? You said she doesn't have MSW, Masters of Social Work, or any other kind of credentials. I think she even told me when I spoke to her then on the phone, she told me that she didn't even have a college degree or something. But she did tell me she was the wife of a doctor, right? So he said, I don't have a plan. I don't know. He became suddenly waffling back and forth in this indecisive, very emotionally all over the place. And I actually secretly started packing up some of the children's things and giving them to a friend of mine to keep at her house, started to make plans to leave. And then it became very clear that, in fact, I really did need to follow up with those plans because I'm in the kitchen with my 1-year-old, my 1.5-year-old, beautiful baby. And his older brother is at pre-K. And my 1-year-old was playing with his little Matchbox cars. So we had a collection of Matchbox cars and trucks and things. And I was doing some cooking or something in the kitchen, and my little one suddenly walks up to me with a big smile on his face, like, Mommy, look, I found something. I'm so proud of myself. What he had in his hand was a large French chef knife of the Chicago cutlery brand, which had been a wedding gift for us. And I went into emergency mode and tried not to make him upset. But I said, "Oh, thank you. You found this. Let Mama have it." And then I put it where it belongs in the drawer. And at first, now I look back and I realized that I was so gaslit that I was saying to myself, "Oh no, if I tell Nettie about this when he comes home from work, he's going to accuse me of being sloppy and careless. He's going to accuse me of sweeping that knife under the refrigerator." And I'm thinking this as I'm like shaking and holding my little 1.5-year-old toddler in my lap at the kitchen table. And then I said to myself, no, I worked in restaurants. I was a prep cook. I was a waitress. I did bookkeeping. I know how you handle sharp cutlery professionally. And I would never have somehow left it on the floor. So it must be something that Nettie did. It's not possible with where I had kept those knives carefully that our 4-year-old could have taken it out. I was a very watchful, attentive mother. And so I'm processing all of this. Again, it's this shocking, unexpected event. And so in the evening, after the children went to sleep, I confronted him about it. And I said, "You sit at the kitchen table. I'm going to tell you something." And I went to the drawer and I pulled the knife out and I said, "You know where I found this today?" And he said, oh, I had to hide that from myself because I don't know what I would do in the night sometimes. And you made me sleep on the couch. And I said to myself, "Okay, Ute, this is correct. You have to leave." And so I completed my plans. It was the middle of October. And I remember I got my 4-year-old off to pre-K. And I took my younger one down to Avenue J. And I bought 3 suitcases, the plaid kind that have the zippers, and they would fit one inside the other. And I had our clothes kind of pre-folded and ready to be packed. I sat my 1.5-year-old on the counter of in this small hole-in-the-wall store run by an Orthodox Jewish Holocaust survivor. And I said, "I have $50 and I need to buy 3 bags, that kind with the zippers, and they should fit one inside the other. I have a cab waiting for me outside." And I showed him my $50 bill. And I said, "Can you sell me that?" And I was like prepared to engage in persuasion if I didn't have enough money. And he said, yes, I will get these 3. I will put them one inside the other, and that's exactly the right amount of money. And then when I took the bag in one hand and my son on my hip on my other side, he said, "Good luck." And then that night, that afternoon, I should say, I had gotten ourselves out, my children and I, to Newark Airport. I called Nettie on a payphone. I paid for these one-way tickets in cash. And I called him and I said, I'm not doing anything illegal, but you are behaving in a way which is not safe for me and the children, and I have to leave. I will be at my parents'. And yeah, I'll let you make some comments on this, Jon.
Ute, it's especially here, you have to buy bags in a hurry from a Jew.
Yes, well, I'm Jewish. I
Right,
love
but just the idea, that sense of what it must, right, what it must have been like for those trying to flee for their lives
yes.
from the Nazis.
Mm.
I get touched in the sense that this is the degree of trauma that these men are perpetrating. Yet in the media,
Yeah.
they are portrayed as the victims. They are portrayed as the ones that are troubled. Now, these are the men that are creating trauma because of their own abject selfishness. And there you were, a wife, and you have a brief window of time, only hours. Your ex, a very bright guy,
yes,
right? Very particular, evidently, because he knows how to fold things just so to hide journals. And so I just want the viewers, I want the listeners to picture that. And how many women have been there? It's just so traumatizing to think that you had to have what amounted to an escape plan because you find this knife. This is a man that you don't know how unstable he is, because when a man descends into the depths of selfishness, everything becomes inverted. Then you layer that with deviant sexuality. Now you have a man that potentially can do all sorts of even heinous things, the kinds of men that I worked with. So all you knew is you had a few hours to execute this plan to get to the airport.
Yes.
With 2 kids, because you don't know if he arrives home, what he's going to do, or if he's going to stop here, he's going to take the kids, or he's going to call the police on you. You don't know. So the pathos, the intensity, the drama, as you were describing, I'm feeling. So you finally get to the airport, you make the call, and you're going to get on the airplane. This is the kind of trauma that you went through, that this man and his selfish choices created. These men are not the victims. They are the victimizers. Then he has the nerve, as all these guys do, to end up gaslighting you. It's very methodical.
Yes.
So all these years later, how many years has it been, Ute? Because think about it's still, this trauma is still inside of you.
Yes, I know. Yes, it's a little over 30 years ago now.
There.
It was 1992.
That's what people need to understand, that this fallout from these selfish, abject, selfish men. Well, I have to go find yourself and still be responsible and do the right thing. We all need to go find ourselves. There isn't a man alive, there isn't an adult alive that hasn't hit a time where they feel down and temptation's calling them. Doesn't mean we have the right to jettison our lifelong promises that people are counting on us. We don't get a pass just because we're steeped in porn and I want to dress in women's underwear. No. He walked out on a family, as it were, as far as being betrayed. I mean, you were betrayed, and now, you're left to wonder, what is this guy going to do? I don't know. I don't even know any longer the man that I'm married to. And so all the stress was on you to protect you and your kids.
Yes. And then, of course, what he said was, well, I wasn't going to kill myself. I just put that knife there.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
From myself. But he was using the knife, I believe, to gaslight me.
Of course, right? He was.
But I'm a trained teacher now. I subsequently went through a lot of training and special education training. And I've actually dealt with parents of students of mine who had to be asked to leave the home because they were expressing suicidal ideation. I know now, and I was trained, in the last 20 years or so, that you cannot have a suicidal adult in a household with children. You can't have those two things together, because I sort of felt like, well, you are making up a narrative where you are demonstrating to me that you are suicidal, but then later I'm at my parents' house and he's talking to me on the phone and saying, well, I really wasn't seriously suicidal, but and it was almost like he admitted that he was gaslighting me. And the thing is, this is another piece, is that you are suddenly grieving the man that you knew. There were times earlier you married him for a reason. You thought you were on a kind of traditional path. And so you're also, as a woman and a wife, you're in the process of grieving what you thought you had, this man you thought you knew well, this man that you had intimate physical relationships with, resulting in pregnancies. And so there's a lot of conflicting emotions, and I kind of knew that I didn't want to really be sympathetic with him with this suicide story, with this emotional blackmail that he's using on me, which is now almost codified by these groomers. They're preaching it to these kids now to say. But on the other hand, I actually said to a friend of mine, I feel that I might have his blood on my hands. I did care about his life. He was my husband. He was the father of my children. It's a very, very narrow place to be. But suddenly, everything about him and his cross-sex ideation is the important event that's happening. He's coming out. He's stunning and brave. His groomer, who has no credentials, is cheering him on every afternoon when she accepts $150 cash from him. There's an interesting thing, Jon, that's happened recently on my YouTube channel in comments. I make YouTube videos, usually 12 minutes long or so, highlighting the stories of some of the trans widows who contact me with similar stories and becoming their voice. And I also tell little pieces of my story, usually slightly less dramatically, but I think it's you're bringing this out in me, Jon and Brad. But I get to this point, you mentioned it before, sometimes I get to this point where linguistically I get lost. And it was so wonderful to hear from you, Jon, that is actually a symptom of the PTSD. And these mental health so-called experts will not recognize that they are giving the wives, the mothers of children, PTSD and interfering with the safety and well-being of the little children. It's really unfathomable.
It truly is. And that's why I'm so grateful, Ute, that you're willing to come on. Because I am dedicated, Brad is dedicated to unmasking the trans movement, which is really, of the overall population of people that we're seeing, in my estimation, the pushers, the deviant, and not just sexually, but those that are diabolical, represent about the 20%. It is those radical activists that a big part of them, a big portion of that, know what they're doing. They're pushing the agenda. It's destroying families, and it's leaving in its wake carnage of human lives. Women who trusted the men, they took them at face value, and then the kids, and they're left in the wake. These the wounded. I'm just picturing body parts, so to speak, to be graphic. They run you over, and then you're supposed to just deal with it, when the narrative then is still focused on, and you said it perfectly, these brave, stunning men. No, these are moral cowards that have flaked on their most important promises and responsibilities, and now they're viewed as heroic. No, these are men that have made extremely selfish choices and have become steeped in porn. So they became extremely sexually deviant, and it was fast tracked through porn.
And there's a mental health issue to this all too, obviously, and that's the where we come in. And we're not against trans or gays or LGBTQ plus blah blah blah. It's got more to do than that, doesn't it, Jon?
Brad, that is so correct. We're not against any population people, but again, there's no such things as trans. There are just people, men and women, boys and girls, who are confused, and they've been manipulated and exploited. Unlike, I'd agree, and we could make the case that maybe Ute's husband originally had some issues. That's fine. Deal with the issues responsibly. But once he got into pornography, once he got into deviance, then the sympathies have to shift away from that man, because he's making choices that are negatively impacting the lives of other people. It's at that point that he bears responsibility for destroying his marriage and destroying his family. Ute, we've just gotten into your story. Would you be willing to come back? We're going to pick it up at this point. And yes, you have so much insight and so much knowledge. There's things happening in current events, yes, that you have great insight to. But where can people find you? You referenced your YouTube. Help people know where they can find you and reach out, and they can either contact you directly or they can reach out to us, and we'll pass that information along to you.
Yes. Well, I have a YouTube channel under this pen name of mine, Ute Heggen. That's the whole name. And of course, I've published my book, which is available from iUniverse.com. It's available from Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I haven't been canceled from them so far. There's an ebook, which is very inexpensive, and the soft cover with the illustrations is about $28 US. And then about a year ago, I started a WordPress blog, which is Ute Heggen grasswidow.wordpress.com. And there is a contact form there. And people have been contacting me, ex-wives, i.e. trans widows, and also some parents of individuals who have gone down this path, as well as siblings of, I've been telling people, I will be your voice if you feel that you can't interview with John Uhler and tell how it affected your family. You know, I can be your voice. And so I have, I name so far my trans widows whose true tales I'm telling by Shakespearean names. So I've got Juliet and Ophelia and Portia, and they all have so much to say. The practitioners, the psychologists, sexologists, therapists, those people who are so-called experts in the cross-sex ideation. I prefer to use that term instead of transgender, because gender for me is a word that doesn't really have a definition. I think that they are misguided, to be kind. They are misguided. They are also, unfortunately, they have conflict of interest. They're not recognizing that they have conflicts of interest, and a lot is coming out now regarding studies where actually they are simply profit loudspeakers from pharmaceuticals companies. Pharmaceuticals companies have been funding these studies, and therefore the researchers, the so-called researchers, are not going to publish something that's going to put these drugs and so on in a negative way. So when I found out that young girls are getting involved in this and then regretting it 6 months or 6 years later, I just said to myself, I have to use my voice. I'm retired. No one can cancel me. And so I've decided to do this. although it is sometimes hard to revisit my own past. It is hard.
Well, we're very appreciative that you're willing to. We're going to have you back on a regular basis because there's so much in your story. And then you have been keeping your finger on the pulse of research that's been coming out, articles, and so you are a wealth of knowledge. So thank you so much for being willing to share with us. And Brad, this is compelling for you and me to have to continue to listen to the impact of what the true victims, the true survivors go through.
100%, Jon. It's
thank you.
I'm hoping that I don't have nightmares as well, Ute. Obviously, this isn't a topic that, as a broadcaster, we discuss on a regular basis. I've kind of taken on this challenge as a broadcaster to bring this to light. But yeah, wow, what a lot to unpack and a lot to understand and a lot of depth to all of this whole message. Thank you very much, both of you, for being here today. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement. There's more. Check out our episodes. There are many, many episodes from many great guests. We have links, and we can also get you set up where you can actually have webinars very soon with these particular guests and join us in some great chats that will answer your questions at home. I'm Brad Wilder. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement with Jon Uhler. We'll see you next time.